Hey everybody, Minus here from PantheonPlus once again, and we are continuing our Races of Terminus series by talking about the Dark Myr. But before we get to that, I just really do want to thank everybody. We had an awesome week last week of conversation around the halflings. I got a lot of thumbs ups and a lot of encouragement from the community, especially because this was one of my first videos with the new format by myself, taking some time off. So I really want to give you guys a huge thanks for that. We did also cross 800 subscriptions. So if you like our content, please consider giving us a subscription or follow us on Twitter at PantheonPlus. Now, the reason Dark Myr is happening tonight is because in the comments to some of our content around the halfling video, we had a lot of people say, hey, when are the Dark Myr? So ask and thou shalt receive, at least anytime I can. So tonight we're going to talk about the Dark Myr. Now, I'm going to give you a little tiny bit of lore this time about Dark Myr, because I think it's pretty important to understanding why this race is an evil race. Now, very clearly, Chris Kane is the person to go to for lore. So you'll see a link come up top right there, and you can go ahead and click that or visit it after the video to get your full dose of lore on the Dark Myr. So let's go ahead and give the quick format here of what we do so you can play along at home and in the comments and let us know what you think. First and foremost, we're going to talk about the race, which is going to be the lore piece here. We're then going to talk about sort of what classes they can be. What classes we think we'll see the most of, and then we're also going to go ahead and kind of talk about what we think of their alignment and how we would rank them on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, what's really important about ranking them on the scale of 1 to 10, if you do as well, or tell us in the comments, or tell us what you think of Dark Myr, it doesn't have to follow any guidelines. It's really what you feel when you're looking at the other races of Terminus, when you're looking at it as a race of an MMO. How do you feel about the Dark Myr? And you can rank that any way you want, 1 to 10, and I'll give you my ranking as well. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and jump right into the race. Now, the Dark Myr are interesting because the Scar are pretty much born of pure evil. The Ogres are sort of leave me alone, but we're going to destroy what we have to. So they have that evil side, or they're seen as an evil race or an outcast race more for their appearance, their size, their brooding nature of just what they're there for. It's almost a fear of the other side that creates them, in my opinion, being an evil race with the Ogres. Dark Myr are interesting. Dark Myr are a race of nobility that's sort of forced into being evil. So if you didn't know the lore already, again, check out Chris, but if you didn't know the lore already, they sort of had nobility. They were creatures of the sea on their home planet, and the seas were dying, and the planet was dying, and they were transferred to Terminus, so to speak. And the issue was that when they were transferred to Terminus and they were put into the waters of Terminus, it wasn't the same thing. The water was different. There was something with it, and the water was poisoning them and killing them. They couldn't breathe the way they did on their own planet. And what's really interesting is they had these gods that they had lived under that mostly they favored that were trying to help them survive. And their favored god watched as they were dying in the water. They were dying from not being able to breathe. They were just watching the whole race mass genocide in Terminus, essentially. But the race was so proud and noble that they didn't want to leave the waters. But at the same time, their favored god did not want to see them die. So she sacrificed herself. And in that sacrifice, taking almost all of her power away, it transformed this noble sea-bearing race, very proud of what they were, into a race that could leave the waters. It would give them lungs. It would change their appearance from the fins and tails in which they had to progress in the water to feet. And again, once again, have those lungs. And because of how proud they were as a race, they hated this. There was an instant rage that filled them. And this rage helped them walk from the water to see their fallen god laying there, basically unable to even defend herself. And these enraged beings that saw themselves change from existence, that ripped their nobility and their pride and their being from themselves into this other form, in a rage, and it like poisoned them. This darkness overcame them, and they actually slaughtered this god that they had favored so much. And a lot of them had then from there left to try to go find a way to reclaim their body. And what was left basically were the keepers that were going to have to rebuild their culture and remember their culture and spread it, but in this new form. And this really caused not only a break within the Dark Myr, the group that wanted to find a way to get their bodies back and live back in the water, and the side that was also upset about that, but wanted to keep their culture, to keep the memories there. But at the end of the day, they were all just so changed from this noble race. That nobility was a distant thought. It became this rage and anger from the violent and horrific events that occurred that made them into this being and made them hate Terminus. They hated the gods that oversaw Terminus. They hated Terminus for the water which poisoned them and killed them. And really their entire existence on Terminus is that of hate. So it makes sense that this race is an evil race when seen by those trying to make a peaceful existence on Terminus and accept it for their new planet. So it's very interesting where we look at the other ones and say they're edgelord, the Scar, just the Scar, and they're evil, and the ogres. The Dark Myr have this deep-rooted history that has caused them to become what they are. And I gotta tell you that even though I haven't gotten this much into the lore and talking about the other races, this really paints a good picture as to why the Dark Myr, as they are what they are. And let's be honest too, the Dark Myr are sort of different, right? So the Dark Myr aren't a standard race that you'd see in every other MMO. So let's go ahead and let's get into the classes. Okay, so the Dark Myr have quite a bit of classes they can be. This race seems to be the most humanistic race of the evil or evil aligned races, and it kind of ties in well with being able to be so many classes so that someone who does want to play a darker race can have the ability to be more. With the Scar and the Ogre, they didn't have a huge selection. The Scar had a little bit more than the Ogre, but this race sort of aligns with the positive side human who can be everything. The Dark Myr are very close. So let's go ahead and run through those classes really quickly. The Dark Myr, when available, will be able to be a bard. They'll be able to be a cleric, one of only 3 races in the game that can be a cleric, by the way. They can be a dire lord, they can be a druid, they can be an enchanter, they can be a monk. When the necromancer is available, they'll be able to be a necromancer. They'll be able to be a rogue, a summoner, a warrior, and a wizard. So really the only classes that a Dark Myr cannot partake in are paladin, ranger, and shaman. Now, it's a little bit interesting the ones that they chose that they can't be. Shaman, maybe I understand. Shaman are usually elemental based off the planet, and being from the water and hating the planet, maybe that's where they can't be a shaman. There's room to understand that. Now for Paladin, it's interesting because Paladin in this game is very much so painted as a very noble, holy race, and they're basically devout paladin or clerics. I'm sorry, they're devout clerics who are transcending into this paladinhood. So it's interesting that you have 3 races that can be cleric, but the Dark Myr cannot ascend into paladin, again due to that chaotic evil standing is really in play in Pantheon, which is very interesting. So when we look at the classes, a lot of them fit pretty well. I'm okay with them being able to be almost anything, but it is interesting that they can be a druid and not a ranger. So that kind of confuses me a bit. I'd almost like to see either they couldn't be a druid or they could be a ranger. Now, tying it into the evil aligned races, it is nice that when you look across the board, you have the options to play a cleric, a druid, or a shaman across all of them. So since they can't be a shaman, I guess giving them druid would be okay. Now, when we look at it, one of the questions we ask in these videos is, what do we believe most people will play? This is a really difficult one for me because I think a lot of people are going to play Dark Myr and they're going to enjoy it very much so. So if I'm saying what do I think they're going to play the most, it's hard. I see them more being played because of my roots in MMOs as a caster type. Probably an enchanter is probably what I would see them as most. So I'm curious what you guys think, but when I think Dark Myr, for some reason, I'm thinking enchanter pretty much right off the bat. So we've already talked a little bit about the fact that they're evil aligned. So what races or what the classes they can be. So moving forward, how would I rank them? Well, I think I would give them a pretty solid rating. They are a class that does have some beauty to them. They are a class that has a humanistic form, and they could see some very cool armor types and such like that. And anybody who's watched any videos, I talk about it. I do like a race that's a little more attractive than something like an ogre, or even something like a Scar on the most occasions, or even honestly things in games like trolls, even dwarves. I have a rough time with. So they are an interesting looking class. I wouldn't put them as high as a Scar. I would probably say I'd give the Dark Myr a 5. And I think that that's probably going to be very low when we look across the community. So you guys tell me what you think. I think we're going to see a lot of people who are really into the Dark Myr. So the last piece that I want to talk about is, what do the Dark Myr remind me of? Well, right away, as an EverQuest fan, which a lot of us are that want to play Pantheon, I think right away to Dark Elves, right? The color of the skin, they're both called Dark something, Dark Myr, Dark Elf. But I guess you take that Dark Elf concept, which the alignment aligns with in this game, and you kind of mix it, and it's kind of funny to say this, but maybe you guys would agree. You kind of mix it with a Naga from World of Warcraft. And World of Warcraft also were creatures that got turned into Naga, which is interesting to me. So you have this sort of transformation in WoW for the Naga that actually is the same thing in this game, where they were transformed from a full sea version of a Dark Myr into a land-walking, lung, air-breathing type of a race. So you have this transition, and the aquatic side that sort of paints that Naga picture mixed with a Dark Elf. So that's sort of how I see it. I'm curious to see what you guys think about that. So again, I'd give them a 5 overall. I do think they're pretty cool. I don't rate them a 5 just because I don't think that they fit. They fit very well in the game. It's just probably something I would not play very often. So tell me what you think. Again, if you enjoy our videos, pretty please go ahead and hit that sub button. That's important for us. We just crossed 800 thanks to all of you. And we're going to continue to work our way up and hopefully get to reach more people, get the word out about Pantheon, get the conversation flowing so we can talk about races, talk about classes, talk about all the news we get. Let's spread the message together and have some fun talking about the game. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you next week.